Hey all, it's your girl Erin, and today I wanted to talk about class reductionism, but I do have a little bit of a preamble to get through before I get onto that. So, to start with, I wanted to just talk about why it is that I use like new definitions of words and stuff. So, I think I've been fairly open about the fact that I consider myself to be a philosopher. In fact, if you were to dig up like my first video, I even identify as a philosopher in that, doing like an intro or whatever. It's really not that great, but when I talk about philosophy and being a philosopher, I'm talking about an active thing that gets done. Like, you do philosophy, and only if you are doing philosophy are you a philosopher. It's not something that's like a label that you put on. It's something that you are using to describe what it is that you do. So if people knew what philosophy was, then it wouldn't really surprise them that I use new definitions of words, because that's literally what philosophers do. That's what you do in philosophy. Philosophy isn't just studying, learning, memorizing, or even understanding existing ideas, existing theories and ideologies and worldviews. It's actually taking those, going a step further, and it's almost like methodically trying to discover new perspectives and new ideas. It's kind of like a sort of scientific exploration of the thought realm. And so basically, when you are a philosopher, obviously everything I say is my opinion, so don't throw your dogma at me, but when you are a philosopher, you do probably benefit from learning what other ideas and ideologies and worldviews are. But more importantly, when you've learned something, you take it and you start to play with it and explore the ideas in your head. So once I understand something, let's say I'm trying to understand a specific ideology and somebody wrote about it and I read their book, they are going to be talking about it using like the definitions and stuff that make sense to them, describing this concept. Now, once I've understood the concept, I can, let's say it's talking about like traffic, because I'm driving. So it's describing all these things about traffic, like maybe it's an ideology of like, this is how to avoid traffic jams, and this is what causes traffic jams, and all this kind of thing. Then what I could do once I've sort of done that initial examination is go into traffic and look at it and compare what I see and compare what other people share about their experiences, and look at other information about traffic and see how does that compare to the ideology. Did they get it right? Were there things they described that actually did happen? Like let's say there's the onlooker problem, where like if there's like some kind of accident or something on the other side of the road, everyone on your side is going to slow down because they kind of want to have a look. So maybe the ideology is saying that that's like the major cause of traffic, and then you can go and you can look, okay, how many traffic jams were there in my city today? Okay, off those, like which sides of the roads were they on? Was there an accident? And you can start to see if the claims the ideology is making are accurate or not. And now, let's say for example, you are like, okay, cool, I agree with like this amount of the stuff they said. Maybe you don't agree with everything, but you agree with some of it, and you start thinking about traffic in this new way. Now, because you understand the concept, you can put it into your own words. You can describe to people these same phenomena. You don't have to call it the onlooker problem anymore. You could call it the curiosity killed the traffic problem or something. You can use new words. You can say that maybe it's not the fact that you're onlooking, but it's the fact that accidents are taking place anyway, and they are like a reminder of your own mortality. And even if you couldn't see what was happening, just knowing that it's there like would cause people to slow down, because I don't know, like you can start to explore it and then come up with new terms and ideas. Or you might say, okay, the real problem with the onlooker issue is that like our roads are they have like these open gaps between, so all we have to do is like put bushes and stuff so that if there is something, no one sees it. Like, so it's not really an onlooker problem, it's a visibility problem, and you're now giving your own take on what it's called. So again, not the greatest analogy in the world. I'm literally coming it up with stuff on the spot. But what I'm trying to say is that that's what being a philosopher is. It's when you take the stuff that other people have said, understand what they're describing, and then explore the thing they're describing to try and discover new things to add to their ideology, or new ideologies entirely that might better explain it, might synthesize multiple different theories together into one theory, etc., etc. And in that process of doing that, you're philosophizing. Now, if all you do is just memorize everyone else's ideologies and get really good at repeating them, sure, you might have knowledge of philosophy, but you're not doing philosophy. You're not doing the action of it, and you're not a philosopher. And so I've been pretty open about it, that I consider myself to be a philosopher. And so what that means is that I'm pretty much always going to be using my own definitions and putting things in my own words, because I shouldn't need to retranslate things back out. So like if someone talked about something with a specific framing and I understood what they were saying, and then I looked at the thing they were talking about, came up with my own ideas on it, and described those things in my own words, then that's valid. I shouldn't have to then take the things that I've now understood in my own words and retranslate it back into the language someone else used just to communicate it, especially if I think my way of describing it is easier to understand, or more accurate, or more applicable to more areas, etc. So a lot of the time there's like this huge amount of pushback when you try to make up your own definitions for words or create new terms, etc. And it kind of always ends up being people who are not philosophers doing those kinds of attacks. Because the way that a philosopher would attack you coming up with your own ideas and phrases and definitions is they would understand the concepts that's the subject of the discussion, and they would understand what you're trying to say, and they would see, oh, how you're describing the phenomenon is different from that person because you're saying it's this instead of that, and I think doing that is a mistake. You shouldn't be doing this instead of that because of this reason. That's how a philosopher would criticize another philosopher. Someone who isn't a philosopher, they would just hear what you're saying and be like, that doesn't match what I've already memorized, therefore it must be wrong. And they don't actually have a perception of the subject matter. They haven't been able to put it into their own words, so they can't understand it well enough to tell why one would be better than the other. And so then it ends up being based on things like who's more well known, who has the more social capital, who has more people said is right, and that is in some ways an authoritarian way of thinking, because you've got to, in my opinion, be able to challenge even what is apparently a consensus, because there's a consensus on the world right now to keep doing capitalism, and it's not working out really well for us. There's a consensus in the world right now, at least by the ones who are in power, and there's a scientific consensus that climate change is real, but a political consensus to do nothing about it. Consensus, you might have a consensus to be racist. Like, consensus is nothing. It means absolutely nothing. In fact, you should be more wary of consensus than anything else. And if your wariness leads you to be critical and skeptical of it, but then it ends up holding out and being able to withstand critical analysis, then you got something really useful, because it's got both consensus and it actually makes sense. So let's get on to class reductionism. And the reason why I had to give you that whole big preamble, well, first of all, I don't know if the people watching this video or listening to it will be familiar with my ideology, my thinking, my philosophy. So if I just go straight out of the gate with a new definition that they don't recognize, they might be tempted to start spamming the comments and do the type of thing I said that you shouldn't do, which is just tell me I'm wrong because of X authoritative source, rather than because of an actual critical problem that you see in my logic. So when it comes to class, there is a lot of different ways people determine what it is, and I'm talking about class reductionism. And so what I mean by that is, when your definition of class gets really small, you are reducing your definition of class. And so class reductionism is when you're okay with a reduced definition. Oh, the light's doing something really cool there on my phone. I don't know if you can see it, but a reduced definition of what class is. And so what I think class is it's an emergent phenomenon where some people have privilege over others, where there's inequality, where some people have more power than others in your society. And why I say that it's an emergent phenomenon is that I think it's something that can arise from a variety of different sources, and it's not only caused by one specific thing, but anytime, in my opinion, anytime you allow for inequality in your socio-economic mechanisms, like the way your society works, anytime the functioning of your system has built into it a way for inequality to happen, I think that is going to lead to class. I think it's going to lead to, you say some people are treated as a second-class citizen, basically. So in capitalism, you can see that quite simply. Look at how the rich can get away with all kinds of breaking of laws and crimes that people who aren't rich can't. They can get really good lawyers to defend them, and if the penalty is only a fine or something, then they have so much money that it's effectively not a law to them. Also, because they are in positions of power, because they have a lot of money, they also get treated as being important by society, and so actually trying to hold them accountable, you get pushback because they've already been elevated, and so you've got to almost be you're the underdog if you are trying to hold them accountable for anything. So one way that class can develop is by having money, because money, you're able to just get a whole bunch of it, and when you have a whole bunch of it, you can have a whole lot of things go your way. You can get stuff to happen that you want to happen. And then people who don't have money, they don't have that same power. So money is enabling people to have power over others, and it's creating an inequality in your society. And so money is one of the things that, when it's used, class emerges. Now, another way that class emerges is via having the state, or having like laws with law enforcement, etc. Because once you've got a law, it's something that is fixed in place, and there's always going to be times where it doesn't perfectly apply to what happened. You can't perfectly cater for all eventualities. So there's going to be times when, there's going to be times when the law doesn't suit you. And the people then who are responsible for law enforcement, if they just stick to what they're supposed to do, they just follow orders, or they're just doing their job or whatever, they are going to be creating people in society who the law is not catering for properly, are going to be unfairly persecuted and treated as lawbreakers for something when the law is the actual problem. The law should be changed, or wrong, or the law would be wrong. Laws are always going to be imperfect. Furthermore, the people who get to decide what the laws should be, and the ones with the most say in what becomes law, well, they can just make sure that the laws that actually happen are more in favor of them, or the people that they want to benefit. And if there's people that they want to disadvantage, then they can also have more say and leverage that against those people who are disadvantaged. And so the lawmakers and the people who enforce laws end up being having power over others, and there's an inequality of treatment, and an inequality of power in your society. So having laws and law enforcement and having a government creates class, but having money also creates class. And markets, so maybe you didn't want to call it money, but you just were exchanging things, that's also going to create class, because there's going to be a situation where some people are able to exchange a whole bunch of stuff, and other people are not going to be able to exchange a whole bunch of stuff, because people have different amounts of things, different amounts of abilities to make things, etc. And so because you're allowing exchange to happen, then there's going to develop inequality. People who have a lot of things and people who have a little, and the people with a lot are going to have more ability to have what they want happen. Again, like money. Markets and money go hand in hand. Markets and exchange, money is just the most efficient way to do exchange on a market. And so yes, also having a boss creates class. So if you were all equally had a say in your workplace, and you could democratically make decision makings, then the way things worked in the company could cater for everyone, because everyone has a say. But when only one person has final say, has ownership or whatever of the company, not the workers themselves, then the people who own it are able to set things up in a way that suits them, the working hours that suit them. They're going to be able to decide what you do with your time and energy, and what you use your tools to. And so they're going to have more power than the people who don't have a say. So class emerges from having a hierarchy at work. It emerges from having a hierarchical government. It emerges from having hierarchical economies like markets and exchange. And so when we talk about a classless society, you can't have something that's classless but isn't also stateless. Because if there's a state, the state will be creating class to emerge. you can't have something that's classless but has markets, because the markets will be creating class. And you can't have something that's classless but has hierarchy in the workplace, because that's again going to create class. And so what class reductionism does, the problem with class reductionism, is that instead of having this more broad definition of class where everything that creates inequality and power imbalances is identified as a causer of class, class reductionists will choose only some or one of the causes and claim that that's all that there is to it, that that's all we need to look at when addressing class. You know, having bigotry in your society creates class too, and so getting rid of bigotry is also important in creating a classless society. If you had your economy was non-hierarchical and everything was non-hierarchical, you didn't have a state, you didn't have markets, but people still treated each other as if some were less than others, you're still going to have class emerging from those bigoted opinions. And that's why socialism and anarchism need to go together so well, because anarchism and the ideas within it allow us to address bigotry, not just the economic side, which is what socialism addresses. Because for socialism to work, for a society to actually be classless, socialism is a classless economic model, and for society to actually be able to function on a classless economic model, it needs to also not have class in any other way, or else, you know, the economic side of things will just be corrupted, and the class that's being caused from other things will end up impacting your economy, because people will bias their economic activities in those class ways. And so you can't even say that class is only the economic side of it. There's even a dynamic where class gets created by bigotry. And so if we really want, you know, a classless economy, we also need to get rid of everything else in society that creates class, so that equality, not like everyone having the same stuff, but like everyone having the same value, in like no one is treated as subhuman, or like their needs don't matter or their opinion doesn't matter. And class reductionism, it's dangerous because, wow, this person just really cut me off, pulled all the way right in front of me randomly. So yeah, class reductionism is dangerous because if that's the level you're on, you basically cannot ever go from where you are to having a classless society unless you change the way you think and you start to recognize all the causes of class, not just the ones that you recognize right now. And you need to have a broad definition that can catch all instances of class, so that we can actually, you know, see things that cause class to emerge, even if they're completely new things we've never seen before. And so I think an ideology like state capitalism is class reductionist on many levels, because it keeps money around and it keeps the states around. Mutualism is class reductionist because it keeps markets around, it keeps currency around. And I think, yeah, we need to just have that. So that's basically what I wanted to say about class reductionism. Hopefully it was interesting and maybe helpful or whatever, and I'll see you all around. Bye.